And joining me now, USA Today's White House Bureau Chief Susan Page, Charlie Sykes, founder and editor-at-large at The Bulwark and host of The Bulwark podcast, Jason Furman, former chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, and former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. So, Jason Furman, I want to start with you by getting your reaction to Gene Sperling, the White House messaging on the move to tap the reserves, and, of course, this IRS initiative on the standard deduction.
Yeah, I thought that was a terrific interview with my friend Gene. You know, the problem with gasoline prices is that they're largely outside the president's control. I think he's done the right things with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but you can see that if OPEC Plus wants something else to happen, something else can happen. You know, much worse things could have happened with gas prices this year. But, you know, you can't change them a lot in a 2-week period of time. You can't even change them a lot in a 2-month or 2-year period of time. There's just so many forces that go into them.
Yeah, and it's really hard to take on the Saudis as well. Susan Page, the president is seeing those gas prices now. Right now, they're moving in the right direction. They were up 5 cents. Now they're down 7 cents the last week, but still high. The timing here makes sense, but is it too little, too late to change the minds of voters? Is this baked in the cake?
Well, I think the prices are probably baked in the cake. But what this does do for the president to have an event like this today is to show, at least acknowledge that this is something that people are concerned about. We heard him talk yesterday about abortion rights. We know that's an important issue to some voters, but to more Americans, the issue of inflation is important. So the president getting out there saying, we're going to sell 15 million more barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve next month, at least says, I understand that this is a problem that we need to address, but certainly it's a problem that he cannot fix between now and the next 20 days on Election Day.
And Terry McAuliffe, the president is going to attend a private fundraiser for John Fetterman tomorrow. He doesn't have a big slate of campaign stops. I mean, he's going to do Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, but he hasn't been out for candidates as much as you might expect in a midterm. And that most probably because his own poll numbers are creating some of the headwinds that Democrats are facing.
Listen, the best thing that Joe Biden can do for Democrats on the ballot is keep doing what he's doing as president. You just saw Gene Sperling go through a litany of what this administration has accomplished. I mean, it truly is extraordinary. I mean, going back to the days of FDR. I had dinner with Speaker Pelosi last night. We were talking about all the accomplishments that have gone on. And think about it, LBJ, FDR, they had huge Democratic majorities. What has been able to be accomplished for the American people over the course of the last year is just extraordinary. The American Rescue Plan saved our economy. The Inflation Reduction Act lets us now negotiate drug prices for the first time. President Biden's reduced Medicare premiums for the first time in a decade. So the president should continue to be president. He's doing a lot of campaign stops. I mean, it's extraordinary, Andrew. You and I are having this conversation. The Senate won 2 votes. The House very close, single digits. Historically, these numbers should be way against the Democrats. They're not. My message, though, to Democrats, you got to get out there. Third-party candidates are going to be very important this year. If you look at incumbents who are at 47, 48, they haven't hit 50. These third-party candidates in a lot of these races can make a big difference.
And I misspoke.
It's going to make a huge difference.
It's President Obama who's going to those big states.
You bet he is.
Not President Biden.
Well, listen, they're still doing the president's schedule. We got 20 days to go. But listen, this is such a consequential election for us. We have got to keep control of the Senate. We have got to keep the House. We're close. We just need folks to come out and vote. We need those independents and those disgruntled Republicans who don't want to see a national ban on abortion. They don't want to hear about the gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania wanting to charge women with murder for having an abortion. They don't want that. So we've just got to make sure we're doing the door knocking and really getting our feet on the ground and knocking on those doors and getting people to vote.
Charlie Sykes, are all of these moves in some ways the White House telegraphing that Republicans have, at least according to all the polling, they've regained some momentum. They've regained the advantage in the generic ballot, which doesn't mean to say that the undecided can't swing or that the grassroots get out the vote effort can't turn the tide for Democrats.
Right. Well, and that is the reality check. I mean, I understand the happy talk, but the reality check is this is going to be a tough environment. And as long as Democrats are talking about gas prices and the economy, they're going to be losing. If this is a referendum, it's going to be tough for the Democrats. But what they do need to do is make it very clear that this is a choice. And Kevin McCarthy actually, I think, drew that line a little bit more starkly yesterday when he said, I mean, not only, where we can have endless investigations, and my assumption is they'll have impeachment votes of Joe Biden, but he is prepared to play political chicken with the world economy, with the debt ceiling. And he's raised real doubts about whether or not a Republican Congress would continue to support Ukraine, not to mention the national bans on abortion. So if this is a referendum up or down on the Biden administration, Democrats are going to suffer some significant defeats. On the other hand, if it is a choice and they emphasize how disconnected from actual public policy Republicans are and how dangerous a Republican-controlled Congress would be to many of the values that I think the majority of Americans hold, then I think that they're going to be more competitive. But if we are sitting around talking about gas prices on Election Day, I think we know how that's going to turn out because, as you mentioned, I do think at this point it's baked in the cake.
And Jason, you know better than anyone, as you were saying earlier, this is a global phenomenon, as is inflation. And with the war in Ukraine and with the Saudis and Russia, and of course Iran is offline to us because of sanctions, it's depressed some of their output at least, Venezuela, and the like. There's nothing much they can do about the global energy situation in the near term.
Yeah, no, that's right, Andrea. I mean, a lot of what, the president needs to do is focus on what he can do on gas prices, but focus on the full range of other things. Terry talked about some of the important legislation he's done on topics like climate change, tax enforcement, investing in infrastructure, and the like. Those will help our economy in the coming years, but an infrastructure bill isn't about helping the growth rate in the next week. It's about helping it over the next year, the next 5 years, the next decade. At the same time, there's a very tricky macroeconomic task of how to bring inflation down, do it with minimal damage to the gains that the American economy has made. And most of that's being done right now by the Federal Reserve. It would be great if the White House and the Congress could help out. They did one deficit reduction bill, maybe do some more to help out. But even if they could help, primarily, that's a job for the Federal Reserve. And by the way, I commend the president for really respecting the independence of the Federal Reserve, not trying to second guess it, because a lot of other presidents might be doing that at a time like this.
And a lot of other presidents, like one in particular, did do it for 4 years and beat the heck out of the Fed and the Fed chair. Just to follow up on something, though, Jason, there was reporting yesterday in the Washington Post that Newt Gingrich has talked to Kevin McCarthy, and that one of the things they plan to do if they take over is to codify the massive tax cuts from Donald Trump. Talk about blowing a hole in the deficit. And what would that do to the economy at this point with inflation?
Right. I mean, that's the striking thing, is you hear Republicans criticize the inflation rate,
right,
but then you look at their actual policies and their actual proposals, and a lot of them would actually make it worse, not make it better. So the idea that you're going to put at the center of your agenda, a dramatic tax cut, means you're going to end up with more inflation, more budget deficits, higher interest rates, higher mortgage payments. So there's this real disconnect between the criticism and the actually not having solutions, but if anything, making the problem worse.
Susan Page, you wrote the book on Nancy Pelosi, literally. Let me play some part of what the speaker had to say to me yesterday about the younger generation in her caucus who basically want new blood at the top because the whole leadership are in their 80s. What do you say to your own caucus, to these young members? They're, obviously in tough fights, but they want to see the change.
I say just win, baby. Just win. If that's what you have to say to win, fine. And we will not in any way do anything but totally supportive, mobilization-wise, message-wise, money-wise, for those people to win their races. Yes, we need generational change. Of course we do. But in some cases, there's no substitute for experience.
You gotta love it, Susan. I mean, she is as feisty as ever. But yeah, there is an issue in the caucus.
There is an eagerness, I think, in the Democratic caucus, even among those who have such enormous respect, or in some cases fear of Nancy Pelosi, I think there is a sense that it's time for a new generation to take over. And I think that we expect that whatever happens in 20 days, we expect that to happen with the new Congress. I would expect there to be a change in the Democratic leadership. Maybe not everybody. You could certainly see Jim Clyburn continuing to be in some senior position, maybe Steny Hoyer too. But I would be surprised if Nancy Pelosi continued to be the Democratic leader after this new Congress takes over.
Could you see, in that case, could you see her also leaving Congress?
Yes, I think that would be my guess, although she has not confided in me. Maybe she told Terry McAuliffe last night what she's going to do.
Terry?
She didn't confide me in that, but I just leave you with this. Millions of Americans today have health care because of Nancy Pelosi. And you think of what this woman, the legacy that she has left and the lives that she has saved. It's extraordinary. It truly is extraordinary.
No, there's no question of the achievements and of, how fiery she is as a leader. Susan Page, Charlie Sykes, Jason Furman, and Terry McAuliffe. Thanks to all of you.